Hi everyone, just a review of the Chapter 2 PowerPoint to give you more to focus on. Again, Chapter 2 does give us the most information in the book on deduction, and then we move away from that with informal fallacies for several chapters after this. So deductive validity is all about form or structure. The way the argument is ordered. You can see that both of these arguments, even though they're used have very different content, actually have the same form. And that form is boiled down to is best and useful to symbolize. The name is modus ponens, and it's if A then B, and we have A, therefore we have B. And keep in mind that in this type of logic, which the book doesn't really emphasize that much, that this is called symbolic logic, but that's a simple word for it, and the letters stand for sentences that do have truth values. In other words, they are sentences that are either true or false. Modus tollens is another deductively valid form. If A, then B, not B, therefore A. So again, giving it content. If it's spring, then the birds are chirping. The birds aren't chirping, therefore it isn't spring. That is hopefully that content shows you the validity of this, which again, validity is nothing more than meaning that the form is perfect, and if it can look at it this way, if you pour truth into it, if the premises are true, then the conclusion is guaranteed to also be true. So again, canvassing the arguments that the book gives us, there's a hypothetical syllogism, which is 3 if-then statements in a row, and of connecting A to B, B to C, therefore A to C. So again, this is relatively, I believe, a simple framework, and can, I think, be understood that it makes sense or it is valid. So a couple of more forms that are a little less relevant or common, and the form I, which is taking, again, you can have just one premise. An argument really only requires a premise and a conclusion, but it can have 2 premises, it could have 10 premises. And of course, it has at least one final conclusion. So this argument form is not quite as important as the others. So form 1 that was, and this is another form. If all F's are G's and all G's are H's, therefore all F's are H's. This is just like the hypothetical syllogism, except in this case, the variables, the F's and G's, are nouns. So this is what's known as categorical logic that's described in the book. They simply don't repeat that here in the PowerPoint yet. So the larger arguments issue, again, not something I like to dwell on. I think that it's something that you can gather from reading it. And repeating that. I'll bump ahead to, okay, so if an argument isn't valid, deductive reasoning means that it's either on or off. It's either good or bad, valid or invalid. So it is only 2 options. It's a binary system. 2 famous and kind of related ones to the good ones we saw are denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent. So denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent are good because they help us by the name comes from what we do in the second premise. If A then B, not A, therefore not B. The example here may not be perfectly illustrating it, but the point is you can't deny the antecedent and deny the consequent. You could get lucky and it might make sense, but in general, so one way to look at this, I guess, with their content. If abortion is murder, then it's wrong. Abortion is not murder, therefore abortion is not wrong. There could be other reasons why it's wrong. I do believe that this is perhaps a difficult content one to understand. But let's move on to the second one, affirming the consequent. If A, then B, then B. So you try to affirm the consequent, which is the second half of the conditional, and therefore A. So you can see this. I believe the book was probably being written as Trump was taking the presidency. If Bush is still president, then a conservative is now president. Conservative is now president. Therefore, Bush is still president. So you prove invalidity also in your mind by saying, if we assume the premise is true and yet can understand the conclusion to be actually false, or create a scenario where that could be the case, then we've proven invalidity. Conditional statements are the heart of all reasoning. Particularly, they are the absolute heart of symbolic logic, which we just looked at, these arguments, all of them listed here. Conditional statements by themselves are not arguments. That is something we have to just learn as beginning logic students. The thing is that they look like arguments only because we realize that they're asserting a connection that then gets fleshed out by the second and third lines. But you need to have the second and third lines to consider it an argument. Necessary and sufficient conditions. The one way to say it is that that sufficiency moves from the antecedent to the consequent, moves that way, and necessity moves back from the consequent to the antecedent. If you follow that rule, you will understand and get correct that what is a necessary and sufficient condition. So if I say, if it rains, practice will be canceled, raining would be a sufficient condition for practice to be canceled, and practice being canceled would be a necessary condition for it having rained. And if you think about it that way, I think it makes a lot of sense. Syllogisms are a product of a classic product of categorical logic. A categorical logic has only 4 types of statements in it: the all SRP, the no SRP, the some SRP, and in this case, S and P stand for subject and predicate, and they are nouns, not sentences. So that's the major difference between categorical and symbolic logic. In symbolic logic, the symbols represent sentences with truth values, and in categorical logic, the variables represent nouns. Then there's some S are not P. And syllogism in categorical logic is an argument containing 3 categorical propositions, 2 premises and 1 conclusion, and 3 terms are each mentioned twice. So humans is mentioned twice, mortals mentioned twice, Greeks mentioned twice. And this is one from the that is mentioned in the text. Reductio ad absurdum proof is saying, for example, okay, let's start with the opposite of what I want to prove, and then show that would lead down a bad path to falsehood, and that way you defend your position in the argument. Tautology's contradictions and contingent statements are relating to the truth of statements, rather than the success or validity of arguments. A tautology is a statement that is logically or necessarily true. Contradiction is something that's necessarily false, and every other statement, if it's not one of those two, is contingent, which just means it depends on certain things as to whether it would be true or false. It's dependent on something in our actual experience. Induction, which is often not called validity, but just that inductive arguments are better understood, I think, as strong or weak. So much of the rest of the book is going to emphasize induction. Science is inductive, all predictions are inherently inductive. As it says here, some examples, some categories using analogies, using statistical inductions, causation, which again is what science looks for. All of this is inductive. So again, much of the rest of the book will be building off of induction, yet deduction is also consistently going to be relevant. Reasoning cogently versus being right in fact. First of all, back up. I missed this screen. The book makes a big deal out of this. The particular to the general to the particular. It's unlikely that this is important to obsess over. However, it is true that, and the book has some good examples about why this is not proper, why it is a misconception, because both of them can be either way. And then of course they end with some homespun wisdom about how it is important to reason correctly, but it is possible sometimes to reason fallaciously and get a true conclusion. This is why, and something that our book doesn't really emphasize much, but going all the way back to the beginning, arguments can be both valid and unsound, or if our book might say uncogent, which simply means that the reasoning is perfect, but the content is bad. It has falsity in one of the premises. Therefore, it is honestly, although it's perfect form, it's still not very useful. And then one screen I also had bypassed was the disjunctive syllogism. Very common to speak in disjuncts, right? We know it's either A or B. We found out it's not A, therefore it's B. So again, think of it that way, that you boil it down to those two. As long as you're right about boiling it down to those two, then then ruling out one leads to the other. Okay, that should give you a good leg up on the quiz. Please let me know if you have questions on any of the exercise examples, or on anything else.